gentlemen, welcome to Shoot, Punch, Kick, the world's foremost podcast featuring three childhood homies from Brooklyn talking about their favorite action flicks from the mid-80s to the mid-90s. My goons, how are you doing today?
A-okay. Just watched some Big Trouble in Little China. Excited to talk about it.
Oh man, I am super hyped. I don't know if you could tell from my intro, but today we were going to be talking about one of my favorite movies. It was my pick. Big Trouble in Little China. Woo!
I have mine in the on the shelf. Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite movies of all time. This is a movie that I've seen a million times, and it just kind of has everything I want in a movie. It's in terms of like the director, the martial arts. It's so freaking great, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about it. Before we get started, let me just ask you guys. So, what's been your exposure to this movie? Let's start with Telly.
I saw this maybe when it came out on VHS for the first time. So I guess in those days it was like it took a year for a movie to come out onto VHS. Yeah. So I probably saw this in '87 at my friend's house, and I was just like, "What is this? What the hell is this?" But it was so entertaining. It was so cool, especially being a Chinese kid, seeing that kind of stuff in like Chinese movies, and now seeing it in an American movie with a much bigger budget was totally awesome. And actually, I watched the movie last night to prepare for this recording. It was the first time I watched it from beginning to end in like 15 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was
Okay.
a very interesting experience, and I'll share more later.
Yeah, that'll be a great point for us to talk about a little bit later, just to see how it holds up. And Dash, why don't you tell us a little bit about yours?
I saw this for the first time for this podcast, and I like John Carpenter. I'm a big like Halloween guy. Escape from New York. Some stuff I didn't see. I'm gonna be honest. Like I think it's like Ghost of Mars.
Oh yeah, really?
on Mars
That's
or
one of the
something.
first. That's one of the first discs I had. First discs
So,
I bought.
oh yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, this one it was a movie. Nothing against it. The box cover art is way different on the Blu-ray than on the tape, and I remember like not really knowing what to expect from it. And I also used to confuse this a lot with Showdown in Little Tokyo,
Oh
which
yeah,
I
yeah.
did see, and just because of the long titles and like location in it, it was just something that I always mixed up. So saw it for the first time, and I'm glad to cross this off on my John Carpenter list.
Y'all know what I think of the movie.
Hated it.
What
Right?
did you
Hated
guys
it?
think? I'll start with you, Dash.
I really I liked it. I didn't love it, but I am glad that I watched it with my wife because I feel like that's what a lot of these movies kind of are, right? Like there's a difference between watching a movie by yourself and watching it with people. And I know this wasn't like a huge hit, quite actually the opposite.
It was a dud.
But
Yeah.
I could see like why this is a cult favorite. I could see why this is a rent this movie with your friends because I had a lot of fun with the movie. So while I don't think it was like a great movie, I had a lot of fun with it. So that my experience watching it was very positive. And I don't know, like we can get more in depth of it, but I like two really quick like overview things. I love that it's a mashup. It's like a Quentin Tarantino, it's kind of like like a hip hop style of like taking a bunch of elements and putting them in one space to like play with each other. So you have like your kung fu, your western, your mysticism stuff, Kurt Russell, who I'm familiar with, these other, actors that I'm familiar with, and they're all in this one space. And what do you get from that? So I love that like big stew of elements that I thought played very well together.
Yeah.
And the second one was the complete subversion of what I thought the movie was going to be. And not to what we were talking about of it being a kung fu movie, but the fact that Kurt Russell is not the hero of this movie. He is the
He's a sidekick.
sidekick of this movie. And it at no point, when you look at the box, Wang Chi is not on
On the
he's
box.
not big, on the box. So I think this movie, like, I don't know if it's good, it works in its favor, but at no point has the conversations I've had beforehand, the box itself, the DVD, like the menu, like footage. It never teed off to what I
You're gonna
thought this
get.
movie would be. And I kind of really appreciated that because as I watched, there's a part where like you just get to a part of the movie and you're like, oh shit, I see what they're doing now. And then everything else kind of like falls into play. So with that, I had a great time watching it.
I like what you were saying too with regards to like it feels almost like Carpenter had his GI Joes playing with his He-Man toy.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Playing with his Transformers, right? Like that idea of like I have all these toys in my toy box, and let's see what happens when we mash them up. So Tally, why don't you give us your impressions after seeing it again? You said it was like the first time you had seen it from start to end in a bunch of years.
Yeah, no, it was a fascinating experience, and I came out of it with some mixed feelings because some things I remembered liking a lot, didn't like as much, but I also found some other things, discovered some other things in the film that I didn't notice as a younger person. So for me, it still holds up for different reasons. I think John Carpenter's artistry really comes through because I think watching it now with critical eyes, just the story and the script are all over the place. I mean, like you don't know what is going on, and if you try to make sense of anything, you're gonna have a headache. But the fact that Carpenter could keep things moving, so you're not asking those questions and saying, wait, that doesn't make sense. Why is he doing this? Like, why does Lopan need to come back to life or anything like that? And also just as much as they over-explain certain things, they don't explain other things. So like monsters so coming out of nowhere, a floating head, right? Just starts.
Yeah, the floating eyeball head. I love that thing.
Exactly. And they don't bother explaining what it is or how it came about or anything like that. And as a horror fan, I really what I loved was Carpenter's always been very influenced by H.P. Lovecraft, and there are some like Lovecraftian themes in the film, just like with some of the supernatural elements and just this idea of like sort of these gods that predated man, and they're coming back through this portal that's going to be created, the subterranean aspect of it. So yeah, I found new things to love, while some other things that we'll talk about later kind of went down half a notch for me.
Okay. So again, to just kind of throw a little bit of set dressing around what was going on. So this is a 1986 movie, and that year that it came out, we had other movies like Aliens coming out, and so I just again back to what we were talking a little bit about earlier. About this being a who's who. Who are some of the standout characters? I mean, again, I know you love Al Leong as Goon number 3, but who do you like? I think the Lopan was casted so perfectly, right? Kim Cattrall, her ability to be quick-witted and kind of speak fast, and her chemistry with Kurt Russell, even though nothing really resulted of it, I think worked out really well. What are some of the highlight casting decisions you guys thought of?
I mean, I think everybody worked well for the role that they were playing, and the role was like you can't think too much into it. Like I feel like every character had like probably 2 bullet points of like you are this, and I thought that they all achieved them. So for instance, like Kurt Russell, you are John Wayne Cowboy, oblivious, like nailed it. I thought Kim
Yeah.
Cattrall as like ambitious lawyer, done. You are reporter looking for a story. Like I thought that everybody really played well, but I think the standouts for me was the casting mostly of the fighters and like the what were they called, the death fuck
The Venoms?
no
Oh,
no
you
no
mean
no
from the three sons were taken from the Shogun Assassin guys, right?
no, it's like what they're called in the movie. I forgot what they're.
Oh, they're called Storms.
Yeah, but just a whole like a party of
Oh,
fighters.
the Lords of Death or something.
Yeah, the Lords of Death. Like
Yeah.
everyone, if you were supposed to look physically imposing, like you don't get much more than like the casting that they did. Carter Wong as
Yeah, man.
was like a very
Yeah.
welcome
Yeah.
addition who I just didn't expect to see. And when he's, when you
When he
see
shows
him and
up.
he's all ripped and shit, you're like, yo, he's like henchman. So like just in terms of having that many henchmen, and generally they would all be throwaway, but to
Yeah.
have like some people that you recognize as other henchmen. Sorry to go back to Ali Young, but like he is the henchman, like for me at least. So
Yeah,
to
for
then
us, yeah.
round him up with like another group of people with that. And I also thought like first off, Miao Yin, respectfully, fine. Like that's how you have to have like, your love interest with this. But I thought like what do you call it? What's his name? Dennis Dunn, Wang
Oh
Chi
yeah. Who's not a
as
martial
the
artist either.
I thought he was like a very great sidekick in this role, but also like you root for him. Like, you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
see him like do his thing. At no point, like I thought that he anchored this
Yeah.
ridiculous world in of like something
Sense
that
of
you
like
can like
realism.
ground it to, and not like I'm using realism, but like
Yeah, in a
his
loose.
motivations there. You want to see him win, like and
Yeah.
also too, I think that for me, his role, especially when I realized that it's actually his movie, was
Yeah.
like fuck yeah, because it was just like that was a thing of like with the casting, you're looking at them in their trope roles, and then as you see them break out of that, you can't lose that, right? Like
Yeah.
they're having a very small sandbox to play in, and I think with going in as like a movie watcher and like based on all these other things, and this is based on all those other things, but you're seeing them expand out of it, like expanding. Oh yeah, this is his movie. I thought that he was great.
I
Just
also think it's kind of interesting too that apparently they initially wanted Jackie Chan for the role, but the studio execs felt like he didn't have the English.
Yeah.
His English wasn't good enough to. And
Well,
I'm
I
wondering
have
how
a
that would have been a different movie.
yeah, I actually have a lot to say about Dennis Dunn's performance, but for me, I think Kurt Russell like makes this film, and I think looking
Thank you.
back now,
100%.
looking
Thank you.
back
I
in
agree.
retrospect, because he was always more of like he wasn't like the A-list guy like Stallone and Schwarzenegger at this time, and he was kind of just there. But what was great about him is I don't think at this point in their careers, Schwarzenegger and Stallone would be playing a buffoon, and the willingness of Kurt Russell to kind of just put himself out there, act like a moron, not
'Cause he's
necessarily being
useless.
not necessarily being the hero, right? Is pretty amazing. I thought Kim Cattrall was good at what she was what she was given. I didn't buy the love story because John Carpenter has never been great at doing love stories, maybe with the exception of Starman. And Victor Wong, who I love in everything he does, even though he's playing the same character, he has such an interesting presence. And for me, I watching this again, I felt the weak link was Dennis Dunn because I did not feel the chemistry. Kurt Russell and Dennis Dunn's character were supposed to be these buddies, and I didn't feel that at all. I didn't feel they had any kind of history together, and also the way Dennis Dunn delivers most of his lines, it feels like you're watching like a drama student in an acting class. It's not very natural. He doesn't inhabit the character the way some of the other actors do, like a
You
Victor
think that's
Wong.
maybe as a result of
And-
him being a straight man?
No, I think that's just being a young. Probably, I mean, I think this was his second like big picture, right, and first major role. So I just maybe it's a lack of experience. But for me, yeah, I just felt like they were trying to go for the buddy kind of buddy thing between Kurt Russell and him, and I couldn't buy that. And I wonder with someone like a Jackie Chan with a lot more charisma, much more acting experience, maybe that I could have bought that more. But so I thought that was a big miss for me that they were going for this buddy comedy, action comedy, and that didn't really hit.
It's funny that you say that. So I hadn't really considered it that way. I would say though, and I'm not sure if this is as a result of the acting or the script. Like I don't know that he necessarily had a whole lot to. Like Kurt Russell is absolutely amazing, but he's written in such a way that it's tough to not love him. Again, he's supposed to be us. I think
Yes.
Kurt Russell is supposed to be our character in a world that we don't understand. But what makes him different from us is that he has this never-ending sense of confidence, right? Like he doesn't know what's going on, but he knows he's gung ho and he's there to fuck some shit up, even if he can't, right?
Yeah, well,
And
he's doing
so
John Wayne, and he's doing
he's
the
doing John Wayne.
arrogant American cowboy, right?
Yeah, yeah, but also because this is a comedy, it's like it's not overbearing. It's not, or I mean, it could come off as like um, just annoying, but it's not. It's kind of funny. Um,
Well,
and
for
so
me,
I
like
think
things
he,
like some of the stuff is like they do seem like there's multiple movies happening,
uh huh,
or it's like, see, I think that's kind of why the might be one of the reasons why I kind of like Dennis Dunn's, because it felt like here's this like kind of not greatly acted, not super produced, kung fu ish movie. And here comes like Kurt Russell dropped in. So I wasn't looking at like their roles together as like a Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy kind of deal, where you have these two people exist on this same plane of movie. Like they did feel very mashed up. And even at the beginning, where I was like, this friendship seems weird. Like it definitely didn't seem well placed, and I think that I do wonder if that's like a conscious choice of it feeling like friction, because I think that even just the introduction of like the guns against kung fu, you're like, I just always felt like one of these things doesn't belong here. And I thought that Kurt Russell's just overall appearance in every scene bridge that, even to the point like Carlos in the synopsis downplayed, like he's like he dresses up to go into the brothel. No, he dresses up as like this like full
super
Clark
nerd.
Kent. Where did he get this disguise? Like they don't, no one mentions it, like all of the stuff. And it just, I think some of those things where I don't disagree with the acting or like some of that the chemistry between them. So I do wonder if that's like the intentional aspect of, because that's for me, that got a laugh from me of just like these two people who seemingly would never hang out, but you're telling me that they have like a long history, but I'm not like super feeling it, but like we're still going along with it. And I think that I don't know, overall, like watching it, I felt like, okay, I'll go along with this, take me on this
Right.
ride. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't disagree, but I do wonder if like that is intentional.
Yeah, and Dennis Dunn has charisma, so he's watchable, and it doesn't take me out of the movie. But I think also because they just look, Dennis Dunn looks so young compared to Kurt Russell, and if you're telling me they're old buddies and they, whatever, that's also another reason I couldn't quite wrap my head around that. I literally felt that's why in my mind I always thought that Kurt Russell kind of rolls into Chinatown, meets Dennis Dunn, and goes on this adventure. Not that they're these two buddies, and he's been to Chinatown many times. So that was also maybe a failure of the script too. Just kind of like, this is not the first time Kurt Russell's been in Chinatown and been exposed to a lot of this stuff, right? It's like he's not going to be like, what's that? What's this? What's this? So yeah, that was kind of, and I guess those were some kind of oversights, because I know the script went through many different variations and versions.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too. Is that I think I read that the original version of this was supposed to be a western, right? So kind of seeing that as being the roots of kind of where the story went, I can also envision a different movie completely. I think I prefer this version of it. Yeah, so let's talk for a little bit about the choreography. So again, being a longtime fan of kung fu flicks, just Asian cinema in general, looking back on this, I gotta say, I remember being a lot more impressed with the choreography. Watching it now, not so much. But I think it might lend a little bit to the charm of the film that the martial arts just seems so sketchy, kind of, and like simplistic. The choreography, right, is a little. But again, it's a comedy, so it kind of fits. But and at first my thought was, well, maybe I feel that way because of the way martial arts films are shot now. But then I think back to, the old kung fu flicks I saw. I know Carter Wong was in Snake and Eagle's Shadow too, right? And some of the choreography, some of the Wing Wu Peng stuff is just so much more intricate that this seemed kind of basic by comparison for me. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, the knock for American martial arts movies has always been because in Asia and in Hong Kong, China, Taiwan back in the day, they would spend weeks and months
And they
shooting
could hurt and get hurt, right?
shooting an action scene. So like the ending of Drunken Master 2, apparently that took like months to film, that final fight scene between Jackie Chan and his real life
Hollywood films don't
bodyguard.
have that kind of time.
Whereas yeah, Hollywood films are not going to spend that amount of time. And also this is the 80s where like hyper stylized action was not the norm. It was just usually just guys kind of punching each other back and forth. Right? And I think what's interesting looking back now also being this is the mid 80s and this was sort of like that lull in between the martial arts craze of like Bruce Lee before sort
Jet
of
Li.
the Renaissance with not even Jet Li with Van Damme and Seagal.
Oh,
when
yeah.
martial arts kind of made a bigger
Came back.
comeback in the zeitgeist. So this was kind of in that in between period where you had like Karate Kid and this.
Karate
and
Kid had
Last
the
Dragon.
worst. I was gonna mention Karate Kid because I feel like Karate Kid had some of the worst
Yes,
choreography.
that did,
of all
that's
three
what
of them.
that's what it reminded me of as I was watching this again. That yeah, the choreography is not great or consistent because that just wasn't the norm. But you can imagine an American audience watching some of this for the first time, and just wondering like, what the hell? Why is the guy flying in the air with a sword? And like, none of this is believable. Although the wire work was very restrained, considering that was like a norm over in Asia at
Then-
the time.
Yeah,
So
I think he's
yeah,
using trampolines for some.
yeah.
of that
So
stuff,
the
too.
the choreography, I don't think nothing in it that you would pull out and show a friend as a clip. But I
Yeah.
think it did what it needed to do because it's an adventure film. It's not a martial arts film per se.
To your point, also, Dash, a little bit earlier. I know you were saying that it's not maybe necessarily a kung fu movie per se, but and my memory of this era is a little bit a little bit vague. So maybe Telly, if you can jump in. But I think I remember there was a time in Asian cinema in around the mid '80s where there was a lot of horror films that also included martial arts in it, like ghost stories, right? But also that had some martial arts in it. Where again, you're right, it's not a kung fu movie. It's just a scary movie or a horror film with kung fu in it, right? And I think that kind of speaks to the disconnect between what you were expecting to see and kind of what you got, right?
Yeah, well, this was very wuxia influenced, more so than like a Shaw Brothers. So then you have the flying people, you have the magic, you have the mysticism, and I think one of Carpenter's influences for this film was a film called Zoo Warriors from the
Oh,
Magic
yeah.
Mountain, where
Is that the
there's
one where they're
people
like kangaroos or something?
no, that's Warriors of Virtue. Zoo came out
Oh.
in 1983.
Okay.
And that was by Choi Hark, who directed it. And there was people flying, shooting lasers, things that kind of exploding.
I gotta check that out. What'd you call?
so-
What was the name of that?
Zoo is ZU,
Okay. I'll look
Warriors
that
from the
up.
Magic Mountain.
Okay. Cool.
And so I think it was very brave for Carpenter to do something like this that's just sort of unprecedented. But this was also the last studio film he did for a while because it bombed so bad. And he said, fuck it, I'm done with the studio system. And then he went off and made two independent films, which are two of his best films, Prince of Darkness and They Live. But yeah, it came at an interesting time because, yeah, no one has seen anything like this before. And I think that's sort of one of the reasons why it bombed, because they were like, what is this, you know?
Well, also I think
that was one of the things that I was kind of having an issue with overall, because there was certain stuff that I felt like was a subversion of something else. So Kurt Russell was a subversion of John Wayne, and you can say, okay, I know what X is, and now you're doing Y with it. For some of the stuff, I'm not as familiar with. So I'm familiar with like martial arts films, some Hong Kong films. I'm familiar with how like Asian representation is in Hollywood movies. So when those, the like when they would go against expectations, that's when this movie worked best for me. But in terms of like, I think about something like, would I, one of the things that makes like the Matrix as smart as it is like when you have some knowledge of Christianity, right? Like you say like, okay, you know what the one is, like, oh, this is the context of such and such. I don't know shit about Chinese mysticism, honestly. Like, I don't know if there's like a huge trope about like a sorcerer who needs to regain his physical form, or weddings, or,
No.
like things like this. So there was some stuff where I'm watching this and I'm like, is this problematic? Is this like weird now? Is this something that's like made up? Is this something that's like, a pushback on like Warriors from the Magic Mountain kind of situation? So I think a lot of what this movie did, unfortunately, and I still had a good time with it, but I probably would enjoy it so much more having known. I didn't think that it had the level of like a Pulp Fiction where you need to watch 1950s crime movies to
get it.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, like you might know, like, okay, there's the trope of a boxer fixing a fight, and then we're going to go into that story. But I thought that this one dug a little bit too into some of the weeds on, like, the plot points. And, like, to me, I'm like, haha, exposition, but not really into like what they're saying as the joke. It's just more of like the movie format
The
of
fact
what.
that they're saying it. I think you also bring up an interesting point too about the mysticism. I know this is a weird take, but one thing that kept on occurring to me was that this reminded me of a Chinese version of like a fantasy, like a high fantasy almost. Like I keep on going back to when I was in the cave, when they were in the caves. I was just getting this Lord of the Rings, Moria vibe. I feel like the eye thing that was flying by reminded me of the Palantir a little bit, right? Like that mysticism. I mean, again, I don't pretend to know Chinese mysticism at all, but it did kind of give off like a high fantasy. Like, these aren't things that people ever actually believed. This is just a storytelling in the form of our culture, right? In the, based on kind of our culture's tropes. But again, maybe I'm not the best person to speak on that.
Well, the mysticism in the film is based on mysticism in other films versus actual real
mysticism.
things that people practiced
Gotcha.
or anything like
meta.
that. So yeah, it's very based on it's an ode to martial arts films, and also a nod to sort of some of the Fu Manchu movies and serials from old Hollywood, more than it's based on any sort of cultural practice or anything like that. But I think to your point, Dash, I also mentioned this in a conversation we had. This film was met with a lot of criticism from the Chinese American community when it came out, and actually pulled up an article from 1986 that was in the Los Angeles Times talking about how some of these organizations were concerned about the film because it sort of represented some stereotypes and just sort of these outdated portrayals of Chinese and Chinese culture and things like that, which, looking back, it's like cancel culture was still alive 40 years ago. But I think that's a tricky thing when you have a minority that doesn't often get portrayed in Hollywood movies, and then when they do, they're kind of portrayed in a certain way. And me personally, I never personally had an issue with the film because I saw that, Wang was a hero in the movie, and it wasn't sort of just a blues jam on just like how weird the Chinese culture was. It was a celebration of it in my mind as a kid. Maybe I was stupid and naive, but that's my take. That was my takeaway.
Okay. What are your thoughts on so this movie also heavily uses a lot of special effects work. There's the stop motion stuff. There's the Bigfoot looking monster guy. There's the eyeball, right? What do you the riding of the lightning? What do you guys think some of it I'm not sure if some of it looks a little hammy to me because A, it was so long ago, or B, because he was trying to make it look hammy. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think some of it was, from what I understand, I'm reading some about it. The special effects team was a little bit overwhelmed. I think I forgot if they were working on other projects at the same time or if they promised on the pitch that they could execute at a certain level. And there was a level of like half-assing or just not being able to execute fully what the vision was. But in watching this for the first time in 2024, I felt like it really lent itself to the charm.
It fits, right? It fits,
You're like,
yeah.
and that's what I feel like was constantly like any kind of negative that I have with the movie feels like you could make the case of like the way like a machete is made now of like this is intentionally meant to, like, it almost feels intentional. So like the stuff with the lightning, I think that's just classic like cheese special effects of like you know, rotoscoping or superimposing. Like, it's not great. You know, a lot of the special effects in the movie.
Well, the good thing
great.
that they did, though, at least they put like they had some lighting to go with the rotoscoping, because that's one of the things that drives me crazy when they do those like lightning effects in the old movies before CGI. But there'd be no like hue from the light.
It wouldn't affect,
yeah. So John Carpenter thought of that at least.
Yeah, I read something interesting too or heard it in the apparently in the old black and white movies they would achieve the lightning effect by scratching the film. Like actually putting scratches on the film itself so that it would get the lightning kind of effect, which is interesting.
Yeah, I was just watching some of the effects in this film. To me, it was just like, this is why I love like practical effects also, because one effect I was totally blown away by was that part when Lo Pan starts to glow. And I'm like, how the fuck did they do that? And I had to watch it back and forth, and I realized it was a dummy that it just kind of lit up. But
did you notice also that he was 7 feet tall?
Well, at one point you see him that he's like
standing next to Carter Wong.
Yeah, but also the old age makeup was kind of iffy, although he kind of looked like John Carpenter now, which is ironic.
But I feel like today we still haven't figured out old man makeup.
Yeah, the old age makeup. I thought the creature effects is probably where they cut the most corners, because that like the mouth didn't move. Yeah, there was no articulation in the face or anything like that. But I thought the flying head was pretty cool at that time, because it didn't look like sort of traditional slapdash stop motion, and
he hightailed it. He got shot once.
I thought the effects were pretty good at the time, and it was Richard Edlund doing them, so he did the special effects for Ghostbusters, so you can kind of see that there. And also, if you ever seen Masters of the Universe, they use that same kind of battle thing. That's right. The holograph. Because that's also the same guy doing the effect. So it's literally the same gag in
that's crazy.
Big Trouble in Little China as in Masters of the Universe.
So, I mean, again, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier. This movie was a huge flop. Apparently, so much, in fact, that it caused Carpenter to, like, stop doing, like, films, big budget studio films. I think, from what I read, a big portion of it was that they skimmed on the marketing. So apparently, I guess they did previews, and the previews were enormous. They were great. It was like 97% approval or something, right? Wow. But then they had like a $3 million budget for the marketing, and the marketing, kind of to your point, Anthony, was that like people would look at the poster and weren't really sure what they were looking at or what to expect from the film. Yeah. So I think it's that's a really sad note for this film, because again, I feel like, I mean, it's not Aliens, right? I think it came out the same year as Aliens, right? So it wasn't gonna like top that, but the studio had really high hopes behind what was gonna happen. I think it was so the budget was like $25 million, but it only made like $11 million. And I guess subsequently, it found a cult following in the VHS market, right? And I found some interesting reviews. Where was it? Roger Ebert wrote, "Special effects don't mean much unless we care about the characters who are surrounded by them. And in this movie, we often seem to exist only to fill up the foregrounds." He felt like it was straight out of the era of Charlie Chan and Fu Manchu, with no apologies at all for all of the usual stereotypes.
History hasn't been nice to Roger Ebert. As much as I used to watch that show as a kid, he had a lot of bad takes.
Really? Okay. I'd be interested to go back and see some bad takes.
He had a lot of bad takes on movies that were classics, and he also injected a lot of his own personal politics into his reviews, because at the end of the day, it's about making an entertaining movie, right? We're not trying to...
and not everything has to be art, right?
Yeah, exactly. You got to appreciate for what it is, but also you can't say, because I know he went after like the Friday the 13th movies, oh, this is horrible for like the youth and whatever. It's like, is it entertaining or is it not, right? And those films by today's standards are just so
Okay.
mild and silly,
Yeah.
and no one takes them seriously. So I never listen to what Roger Ebert has to say anymore.
Fair enough. You know, what would be interesting? I'm sure somebody out there has like a YouTube video of like hot takes from his, like terrible.
Oh
movie
yeah, it's on
takes
YouTube. Yeah, just like
Yeah,
him like
there is
trashing movies that were,
that are great.
great. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I
But
want
I
to
mean,
check that out.
that was my thing with this movie. When you asked me what I thought of it, the my main response was like the experience watching it, and a little bit less on the film. Like I do
Itself.
wonder if this would have been as fun by myself.
Well, the great thing about, again, that era is that you can make cheesy movies that are R-rated and designed for an adult audience. I feel like if they were going to make this movie now, it would be geared towards it would be like a children's adventure. Like the way that,
Yeah.
I never saw that movie, but the one with Jackie Chan and Jet Li, where the
Oh,
kid,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
it would, I feel like it would be something like that, where like a young kid enters this world that he doesn't understand, and there's
Yeah.
all this magic and everything going on. And it would be maybe like The Rock would be in it, but we'll
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about that later.
Oh yeah, actually. So speaking of which, I think because we're running a little bit long, let's kind of start to bring it home a little bit. I think we can talk about some of the its influence on other stuff. I mean, I think the obvious and clear influence is Mortal Kombat. Again, I've been referring to this guy as Lord Raiden for the entirety of this pod. What a badass introduction! Like again, I don't know if that Raiden kind of character was represented in any other film. If again, I heard something about the inspiration for the storms being the three assassins from Shogun Assassin, but there was no lightning or anything like that. So a cool image of him riding the lightning in. What a cool idea. And then also I think for Mortal Kombat, I think Lopan was probably inspired the inspiration for Shang Tsung. And again, the reason this is so important to me is because, again, we were huge Mortal Kombat fans growing up. And so I remember, because I had already seen Big Trouble in Little China and it was part of my life, when Mortal Kombat came out and there was Raiden, I instantly identified with who he was, and that was my main. Right? So, I mean, I think that's cool. There's a couple of other ones here. I don't know if you guys want to talk about the Mandarin or Thor, or does anybody have any thoughts on some of the other influences?
Well, I mean, like see, and this is what I am wondering overall with this, and especially with what Telly was saying, and especially about the like Fu Manchu inspirations. Like, I do wonder if this is a lot of other people's only exposure to that, and while I don't disagree that Mortal Kombat was influenced by this movie, I am a little hesitant on giving this movie too much credit. The way, like, I don't know if, like, there might be a movie that he's like, lightning came in and I'm taking that from this movie, and now this is for an American audience, and we're giving John Carpenter the credit for it. The way that a lot of people give Quentin Tarantino a lot of props on Kill Bill stuff for things that are from samurai fiction, Gordon Liu stuff. And so with that, there's like, you know, the Mandarin is Fu Manchu, which did you see the Grindhouse trailers? There's one with Nick Cage. It was with Rob Zombie as the werewolf women of the SS, and Nick Cage plays Fu Manchu. Now, I doubt that character, given like Rob Zombie's like movie knowledge, is based on this movie, right? Like, that it's his inspiration. It's probably from before, but the parallels are still there. So like, I wonder with like a Mandarin, that might have been like influenced by this, which was then influenced by something else. So I think like I can see the tone of Thor Ragnarok feeling very close to this. And if we talk about the potential like sequel, I like that the Thor Ragnarok is something that I would feel comfortable saying I can see the real influence from this, because to me, my favorite part of this movie is that mashup of genre, that mashup of characters. And I thought Thor Ragnarok was like the Marvel version of that.
Can
It
you
was
explain a
like,
little bit more of the correlation? I'm not
so
familiar with.
like it was like I feel like tonally I can see some of it of like Thor is a little bit more of a bumbling idiot the way Kurt Russell's character is. It's a superhero movie mixed with like heavy metal, the magazine,
Yeah, the
mixed
cartoon.
with the general Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you're seeing how those things come together and with their level of like leaning into their mythology of Norse mythology, where this one leaned into some
Gotcha.
aspects of like
Mysticism.
Buddhism or Taoism, and I think that
Gotcha.
it kind of reminds me of like what's going on with Barbie. Like Barbie's a hit, so the studios were like, "Oh, people want movies based on toys," and it's like, "No, you're taking the wrong lesson from it." And I never would have thought that Thor Ragnarok was influenced by this movie unless stated. But when I hear that, I'm like,
It makes sense.
tonally, I feel it. Like vibes wise, I feel it. I feel the influence versus Raiden, Storm, like a lightning dude. You know what I mean? So one's like I feel like definitely apples to apples. Where I think like if Thor Ragnarok, and Taika Waititi's like, hey, I was influenced. I feel like he probably went in taking the vibes and like what lessons worked from this and what can I do with these other aspects. But
Man,
definitely
you got to
a little
believe
bit-
him. It's him, right? He's the one who
Yeah,
made
yeah.
the movie. So if he tells you, then then
But
it's
a
true.
little bit like like I just a little hesitant on like and just from not knowing the genre or the movies leaning into it of like even bringing up I didn't think of like a Shogun Assassin being an influence, but now when you're saying that it's like, oh shit, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. So I don't want to give too much credit to this movie, but
Yeah,
I think
well,
it's
I
cool
think
like
they, I mean,
gave,
the
popularity
creators
to it.
of Mortal Kombat did cite that the inspiration for Raiden, not necessarily the game or anything like that, was from them seeing Big Trouble in Little China and seeing that character in that version of that character in Big Trouble in Little China. So, in that sense, it certainly influenced Raiden. Obviously, all those tournament movies, I think. The OG influence is going to be Enter the Dragon.
Into the Dragon, yeah, of course, of course. So what's going on? I heard you guys mention. I'm not too familiar. What's going on with this supposed sequel that might happen or may or may not happen?
I mean, that was brought up years ago. I don't even know how long it's been now, but they were talking about doing some kind of remake or sequel or reboot or whatever with The Rock starring in it, Dwayne Johnson. But I don't think I've
thank
heard of
you.
anything. I haven't heard anything new. Let me see on Wikipedia. Yeah, because they announced this in 2015, so almost 10 years ago. And there hasn't been much movement behind it. So, and like I said, I think
hopefully-
knowing sort of Dwayne Johnson's track record and the types of family-friendly movies that he does, I imagine that this would probably be the type of movie that I was just describing,
Yeah.
where it's maybe a bunch of kids and he takes them on an adventure.
No, I'm good.
Which
I'm
is
good.
like
I
not
did
something
think it
I
was-
want to see. That's the thing. Yeah, like
Thanks,
those
but no thanks.
80s, you could make those kind of goofy movies, and an adult can appreciate it. Now it's like I can't sit through something like that if it's made for kids.
And I do appreciate just like the standalone nature of it, like that whole "this is the end" or is it, or like
Well, there is a little cliffhanger at the end.
yeah, and I love that, and I think I really like the just the way it ended. That it's bookended with him pulling into San Francisco and leaving San Francisco, and I think one of the things that I like really liked is it's an adventure. One event, like I don't think characters go on adventures as much. Like I feel like as a kid, you would get a little bit more of like this person in this scenario. So it's like almost like a Scooby Doo, right? Like they go around town and they just get into some hijinks and then kind of leave. But just having the one, like, mentally, I feel like, is this just what he does? Does he just go into a town and like mix it up with different people and solve their problems or like, help them and then move on and he's back on the road? Like
He's
no
David
one,
Banner.
Well,
no
that
one pulls him back on the
I
CV.
think,
So like,
and I think that's like one example of what I meant by just kind of like a lot of holes in the script, and something we talked about when we did the Commando review in terms of motivation. Because looking at it now as a middle-aged man and watching these two guys, these are the two ultimate simps in a way, because Wang, he doesn't know this girl, right? He's just a mail order bride, and now he's willing to risk his life and his head over this woman. And the
Wait a
same
minute,
thing
is that the case? I didn't know. I
yeah,
didn't
she's
realize
like a
that she
mail
was
order bride, basically. Like he
didn't
never met
realize
her or
that.
anything.
Oh.
Yeah, and then the
didn't know
same thing
that.
with Kurt Russell. It's like there's no reason for him to be part of this adventure unless he's just trying to save Kim Cattrall, who he literally met like a day ago. And again,
No, the
this
whole
is where
thing is his truck. It's about his truck. That's his motivation.
oh, okay, but even still, right? So that's where I think like there was just like a lot of rewrites, and it got to a point where they're like, okay, fuck it, we'll just ignore it. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Because like again, if Gracie Law was in fact Wang's lawyer or whatever that used to come by the restaurant all the time, Kurt Russell, who's supposed to be his buddy, would have already met her already.
Know who she is.
Yeah. So
Yeah, she just
again,
showed
so-
up. She just showed up instantly,
right?
like, at the house.
And that's why, like, when I remember the film, I think, oh yeah, that's like that was Wang's like girlfriend, long-term girlfriend, and Kurt Russell and Kim Cattrall were already dating in the movie. But no, they just literally just met these two people.
I did not realize that. That's interesting. Yeah, another interesting little bit at the tail end there was that apparently John Carpenter did the music for the last for the end credits. I had no idea he was.
Yeah, he did a song. There's a
musician.
music video that John Carpenter did like most of his scores for his movies.
John Carpenter,
He did
I
the
credit
Halloween score.
with music's composing almost as much as his directing. Like with in terms of like the rise of like synthwave and stuff. I have a shirt. Oh man, I now I'm just remembering I should have wore it. I have a shirt. It says "Music by" and it's John Carpenter. It looks like a movie credit.
Oh, that's dope.
He's an OG. Like the Escape from New York theme. He did like the full soundtrack for
I love
like,
that synthwave
a
sound,
lot
man.
of his
It brings me
movies,
back.
and they just
Christine
go.
is great.
Yeah, they just go really hard. And if anyone's listening after the podcast, like just YouTube John Carpenter music playlist, and you'll just be taken back to just
That's dope.
some really cool vibes.
And just speaking of John Carpenter, I think what has been amazing about his career, and he's a bit of a curmudgeon now because of the way he was screwed over by the studios. But if you look at his filmography, and the fact that he would not allow himself to be boxed in, like the movie he did right before this was Starman. Movie he did before that was Christine. Movie before that, The Thing, Escape from New York. I think he was just trying to genre hop. And I think that was probably what affected the box office for Big Trouble in Little China, because you're telling me the director of Halloween,
The Thing.
where I think most people knew him from, or Escape from New York, is now doing comedy. I don't know if I'm reading that, I don't know film, I don't know if I'm really that's going to sell me on the fact that I should go see this. And also Kurt Russell, because I was looking at their filmographies at the time. Kurt Russell wasn't established as like an action guy yet, because the films he did, the three films he did before this was The Best of Times, which was
Overboard
a comedy.
No,
He
Overboard
did
was way
Overboard.
later.
He did after Big Trouble in Little China,
okay.
but he didn't really have his action run until like the early to mid '90s. So he wasn't established as an action guy either. So, and he was more known to the public as being this child star, has been in some movies, but he certainly wasn't sort of a guaranteed box office.
Well, I think that kept me from watching it, because I had to keep reconciling of what I knew about John Carpenter and this fucking movie cover, right? Like, I love They Live for being like what I think is one of the best like satirical movies, like with a mess, like in terms of like woke movies or preaching movies. Like that was a movie that very specifically had a message, but was so masterfully done. And I feel like
You might not even notice.
and I don't think that anyone would disagree with the message in it. Like it's almost like a universal truth to that point. So like you take something like that, someone that like basically took slasher movies to a whole different degree. I love Escape from New York. And then I'm looking at this box, and up until like this podcast, again, like I didn't see the movie, so I didn't follow much of the discourse. I didn't listen to any podcasts. I didn't read about it. It wasn't until I watched it, 20 minutes in, 15 minutes in, that I understood that it's a comedy. So, like it wasn't on the box, like, the cult classic comedy, and I'm going in watching this, with that in mind. So I could totally see people not knowing what to expect. And in a year with major hits, like, are you going to gamble on seeing this?
Yeah, I mean, this came out again. Aliens, Top Gun came out that year, so it's just like there's some serious blockbusters. I mean, and it's funny again, to your point. I was wondering this question again: is this movie really an action movie that has comedic beats, or is this a comedy that has action beats, or somewhere kind of in the middle? And I didn't realize
it's a comedic adventure.
well, so
Yeah.
the thing for me was, as a kid, I never really thought it was funny. It's only now looking back on it as an adult that I'm like, oh man, yeah, this dude keeps on shooting. Well, they have something about ceilings in this movie, right? There's like 3 different points where the roof of something just pops off, right? Like in the brothel, and then for some reason Raiden is just throwing lightning at the ceiling for no reason, then brings the roof down. Then they escape through some hole, and then like Raiden, I guess they threw like a Buddha down on Raiden's head to kill him, right? And so a lot of that stuff is funny. Or like when Jack is trying to escape the business, and then he's like, "All right, guys, we're just gonna open this door and we're just gonna run further." And then he opens the door and all the enemies. He's like, "I think we're trapped."
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's really funny. And as funny as a kid, I never picked up on the fact that that was so funny.
I mean, if it wasn't, I think my enjoyment is purely driven
Comedic.
from the comedy from it. It was once I started like laughing with it, and like turning to my wife, and she was like laughing at certain parts that I found funny, or that I didn't find as funny, and she's rolling, and then you get that contagious laughter. And the reason why I think like I would definitely categorize it as like a comedy adventure, but the all of the things that happen seem to be rooted in the comedy. So it's not that they go into the brothel to rescue, it's how they go in. And how they go in is in a comedic fashion through a disguise, through, these things. So like I would say like Rush Hour, I would say, is an action comedy, right? Like these are big set pieces where there's a full construction scaffolding outside, and that scene is based around seeing Jackie Chan do cool shit on the scaffolding, and a pole will fall and he'll do a flip, and like through that, Chris Tucker will be like, "All right, I'm going to take the stairs." And then you laugh at his response to the set piece, which is driven by Jackie Chan and the stuntman's ability, where I feel like this one was like, hey, here's a joke of like Kurt Russell having lipstick on his face, him being knocked out, trying to push this one guy off of him while all of the action is going on around him, where the important part of that isn't the action that's going on. It's the fact that he's not involved. And that's the focus of it. And
He
I would
kicks the
say it's
knife
definitely
out.
it felt more of a comedy because of how it was the root of all of these other moments.
Yeah, man. All right, guys. So I think we've had a pretty in-depth discussion on, again, this one of my favorite movies. I think the time has come now for us to go ahead and give our ratings. Telly, why don't you go ahead and lead us off with how you score this?
Are we using any particular?
It's a 5-point scale with middle, with 0.5.
Oh, I thought we were gonna do some kind of like gimmicky.
Yeah, you got to pick something weird about it.
Yeah.
Okay. I was planning on using the source. I was planning on giving it the mics on the mic scale, but
Go ahead.
But again, whatever you want, Telly. I mean, listen, it's your world, man. We're just squirrels, man.
Oh man. Okay. I'll give it 3 Albert Leongs out of 5.
Ooh.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And let me ask you this: has that number changed from when you were, let's say, 13-year-old Telly?
Yes, I think it's like brought
Come
down a
down,
little
probably?
bit. Yeah.
All right. All right, Dash, my brother.
I was gonna go with with Al Leong's, but I'll give this 3.5 Carter Wongs out
Okay.
of 5. It's the thing that would keep it from I would give it more than a 3 because 3 is like I liked it, but I can't really see myself watching it again. This is a movie I definitely can see myself. I bought the Blu-ray for the
it.
podcast. Can definitely see myself watching it, but I don't know if I'll watch this movie alone. Like I
Okay.
could see friends being over and it, you know, pops into the Blu-ray player. Like I think this is like an event and a, you know, like a kind of time to chill. But I had a great time with it, and I think it's like, you know, I could see it being a good like background movie for you having seen it a bunch of times. But I did enjoy it. I thought the jokes landed, and I'm glad that I got the chance to see this.
All right, so now let me ask you this though: what do you think 10-year-old Dash would have rated it?
Probably, I think maybe a 3.
Oh,
I
really? You
think
wouldn't have liked it? You wouldn't have liked it as much?
And
when you
I'll
were
say
younger?
why, because generally the things that were there, I've seen somewhat in other movies that just resonated a little bit more for me. So, for example, the whole underground reminded me of Goonies. Like, you know,
Yeah,
they go into
gotcha.
this area, and now comparing these two, I would go Goonies every time as a kid, right? Like, you know, these are kids my age. There's pirates, like things that are a little bit more my speed. I think
Gotcha.
a large amount of the comedy would have been lost on me. And then, you know, in terms of like, you know, being 10, I was seeing a lot, in my opinion, better action at that time. Like, you know, if you're going like your John Claude Van Damme's and like bigger American set pieces. And then I also would have no context of a lot of the things that it's like either parodying. So I like it more as an adult. I wish you know, I feel like I probably would have given this a 5 at 40 in 1986, like of, you know,
As an
this
adult,
being,
then? Yeah,
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 this
yeah.
just being like a really refreshing time and going with the boys and like having a good time and like, you know, kind of chilling. But yeah, I think this is one of those movies that I think like as a kid I watched adult movies, but I feel like I just would have been a lot, like I'm
More
watching
lost
this
on it.
like I'm clapping when henchmen show up. You know what I mean? Like, so a lot of the positives for me, like Kurt Russell being in it, I don't know if I would have cared as much as a kid. I think it still
Gotcha.
would have been fun, but not much. I think I'm glad I saw it when I'm seeing it.
And for me, I am going to give this a 4 Raiden lightning strikes out of 5. I think before having done this kind of research for watching this, it was definitely a 4.5. It wasn't quite ever at the tier of like a Terminator 2, or like a Godfather, which is like the 5. But it was definitely a close 4.5. But now watching it again with a more critical eye, I start to see some more of the flaws in the movie and realized how much of that extra point 0.5 was just nostalgia. And again, for me, so to answer to the question, like 11-year-old Carlos would have given this a 5 or maybe even a 4.5, because again, for me, what it represented was like I grew up with my dad taking me to the Music Palace, right? And where you go and watch, 3 kung fu flicks for, for like $2, right? And so it was something that I always kind of grew up with, and it wasn't really until I kind of like started hanging out with you guys that I found other friends that were also into this kind of thing. So for me, and I think I saw this movie before we became friends, right? I think I saw this like probably the year it came out. So I was 6. I didn't mind up meeting you guys till 11 or 12. It was finally a representation of a niche kind of film, a style, but like in a broader context where it's like American audiences could see it. So it kind of felt like my film. You know what I'm saying? It was kind of like something like finally somebody I can talk to my friends about something that I found really interesting, where I couldn't talk about Snake and Eagle's Shadow to the kids in kindergarten, right? So yeah, so it's come down a little bit, but still a classic and something I love to have around at all times. So yeah, I think that wraps things up. I think the last thing is, I believe Telly, if you have a pick for our next film that we're going to be discussing, take the floor.
Yes, I'm going to go deeper down the rabbit hole with another cult film, probably one of the only horror action slasher movies made.
Nice,
Maniac Cop
nice.
2.
But 2, okay, okay.
2.
2, okay. Maniac Cop 2. I'm looking. I have not seen that movie since probably I saw it with you.
I used to have the laser disc and I used to watch it a lot. So
I remember catching that back in the day on I don't know if you remember they used to do HBO on like Thursdays. It would just be like, very low budget or like direct to movies and just not to talk about the movie, but is that's a Blu-ray? Hold
That's
that
a
hold that
Blu-ray,
up one more time. So make sure
Blu-ray and DVD combo from
Sweet.
Screen Factory. I think it was Screen Factory.
That's a nice cover.
Nice, you got the DVDs in case you need a frisbee.
Yeah, no, Blue Underground. Sorry, yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you, gentlemen, my boys. I really appreciate spending the time to talk to you about one of my favorite films. To the audience, we want to thank you guys for tuning in with us. We'd love it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. Especially, both are important, but I'm really interested in the comment portion. But I really am interested in kind of getting in there with some of the listeners and kind of trading ideas back and forth and other movies. I'd really like to build a solid community around this genre of time and film that we all really love. So if you could, that'd be a real huge help to us. And thank you for taking the time, and I guess we'll see you next week talking about Maniac Cop 2.
Hell yeah. Shoot, punch,
See you
kick.
later. Shoot, punch, kick.